You thought the Arctic was nothing more than a forgotten expanse of ice, but a nation has just sunk its claws into it without firing a single shot. Danish flags still fly over Nuuk, yet in every strategic office, it is now American advisors who whisper the decisions. You think you're witnessing an alliance between friends, but the embrace more closely resembles that of a python around a prey too confident to flee. 3 decades of glacier melt have revealed treasures beneath the rock that the whole world covets and that a single power is determined to possess absolutely. The lithium still lies dormant in these geological veins, but contracts have already been signed in air-conditioned offices 10,000 kilometers away. Every ton of rare earths mined here will break a link in the chain that connects Beijing to factories around the world, and this break is precisely calculated. You imagine an ordinary commercial transaction, but no one has asked the opinion of the 57,000 inhabitants who have breathed this icy air for millennia. In households in Nuuk, television broadcasts promises of American prosperity, while the elders shake their heads in silence over their cooling tea. Young Greenlanders dream of dollars and the latest smartphones, unaware that their land could become a giant quarry monitored by armed drones. Copenhagen has paid 600 million euros each year to keep this territory afloat, but Washington is now offering billions with no visible return. The trap closes without any apparent violence, because money flows more quietly than blood and leaves fewer traces on the immaculate snow of the Arctic. You think that military alliances protect small states, but NATO's Article 5 never envisaged that one member would devour another from within. A treaty signed in the euphoria of the post-war period suddenly becomes an embarrassing document when yesterday's friend turns into a methodical and smiling predator. The Danish diplomats are desperately seeking a clause that does not exist, while their American counterparts display the patience of a hunter before his wounded prey. Each extra day of negotiations costs Denmark billions in tariffs, and this economic hemorrhage is perfectly orchestrated from Washington. You believe that Europe will intervene, but Brussels is already calculating what an open confrontation with its principal military and commercial ally would cost it. The American bases at Thule are quietly expanding every night as European journalists cover scandals less troubling for their governments. Giant radars now point towards the North Pole, turning this ancestral Inuit land into an anti-missile defense shield for a continent that is not theirs. The Golden Dome that they are building will protect millions of Americans, but no one has calculated how many Greenlanders will have to leave their villages to make way for it. You imagine a temporary and voluntary relocation, but the elderly recognize in these promises the same language that their grandparents heard long ago. The first American workers arrive by the thousands in cargo planes, bringing with them eating habits and cultural certainties as invasive as their excavators. The supermarkets in Nuuk are filling with imported goods as traditional hunters discover that their hunting grounds are now off-limits. Every harpoon abandoned in an attic tells of the quiet death of thousand-year-old knowledge that no one thought it worth protecting in the contracts that were signed. You think that economic prosperity will compensate for these losses, but money has never managed to fill the void left by a stolen identity and a forgotten language. The first incidents occur in the Fram Strait when a Russian submarine decides to test the patience of the newly self-proclaimed masters of these icy waters. Moscow will never accept Washington alone, controlling the Northern Sea route, and every Russian icebreaker that approaches carries an unambiguous message. You believe that these tensions will remain diplomatic, but in these international waters, transformed into a strategic corridor, each incident can degenerate in a few minutes. Beijing watches these maneuvers with calculated patience, knowing that every American dollar invested in Greenland is a dollar withdrawn from other strategic theaters. China will lose its monopoly on rare earths, but it may gain something more valuable from watching the West tear itself apart over Arctic rocks. You thought that this annexation concerned only a small, remote territory, but the shockwaves are already reaching factories and wallets around the world. Lithium prices are soaring in the trading rooms as battery manufacturers calculate how long their current reserves will last. Every phone you hold contains metals whose supply now depends on decisions made in bunkers beneath the Greenland ice sheet, and no one has told you. The cave-gelled mines have begun extracting, and the radioactive dust from the rare earths is now mixing with the pure air that the seals and the Inuit breathed. You imagine filters and security protocols, but companies have always known how to cut costs where regulators do not look closely. The first cases of respiratory diseases are appearing in the neighboring villages, and local doctors are sorely lacking in the resources to document what they have begun to observe. Washington promises ultra-modern hospitals for tomorrow, while today's patients cough in waiting rooms where there are not enough chairs and the radiators are not working properly. You believe that local democracy can curb these excesses, but the Greenlandic elections are now being fought with campaign funds coming from across the Atlantic. Each purchased voice resembles a free voice, and it is precisely this resemblance that makes the operation so difficult to denounce and so easy to perpetuate indefinitely. Foreign journalists attempting to investigate discover that their visas are being mysteriously delayed and that their local sources have suddenly become unreachable. You think information circulates freely in the digital age, but algorithms now know which stories deserve to be seen and which must remain in the shadows. The peaceful demonstrations on the streets of Nuuk attract a few hundred people, whom international cameras ignore in favor of more distracting spectacles elsewhere. Every slogan cried into the Arctic wind is lost before it reaches the ears of those who might still change the course of this silent story. The Greenlandic children are now learning American history before the history of their own ancestors, and school textbooks arrive in full containers every quarter. You imagine a natural cultural transition, but when a language dies, millennia of wisdom and poetry fade away without leaving a translation. The last shaman in the village has kept his drums in a locked cupboard ever since the missionaries of progress explained to him that these practices belonged to the past. The northern lights still dance above the new military installations, indifferent to the borders that humans draw and erase according to their momentary appetites. You think that nature will survive all this, but the glaciers that retreat each summer carry away ecological balances that are several millennia old. Polar bears are venturing ever closer to villages, starved by the loss of their hunting territory, and American snipers are waiting for them. Every species that disappears takes with it genetic secrets that science will never have time to study, and this living library burns faster than we know how to read. You think that all of this is reversible, but once certain ecological thresholds are crossed, there is no turning back, no matter how well-intentioned future generations may be. The scientific reports pile up on the desks of decision-makers who nod gravely before signing the following extraction permits without rereading a single page. The world watches this annexation with a horrified fascination and a complicit paralysis that bears an eerie resemblance to the one that always precedes the most predictable historical catastrophe. You may be hoping that a hero will emerge to turn the tide of events, but history teaches that saviors usually arrive too late or never. The architects of this annexation sleep peacefully in their comfortable homes, convinced that strategic necessity always justifies what ordinary morality would condemn. Their children will inherit a world where borders are redrawn by force, and this silent lesson will shape their own ambitions far more than all speeches about the law. You want to believe that international institutions will intervene, but the UN is increasingly like a theater where the powerful play to their own audience. International law exists only so long as those who violate it fear the consequences, and that fear evaporates when the violator possesses the most powerful weapon. Future historians will study this period as the moment when the post-war world order finally gave way to something older and more brutal. You hope that this story will have a happy ending, but fairy tales have never managed to faithfully reflect the complexity of empires and their appetites. If tomorrow another nation were to decide that your territory is indispensable to it, what precise rules could still persuade it to relinquish what it truly desires?